Hey guys, Burek here, and today I'm going to be talking about the Sith Juggernaut ability Force Push. Though this video is primarily from a Juggernaut point of view, these tips on Knockback should be useful for anybody, including other tanks, or even DPS classes that just want to learn how to use their Knockback a little bit more effectively. This video, like my first one, is really just supposed to be a helpful video. I'm not claiming to be the greatest tank in the world. I just want to help people learn to use their Knockbacks more effectively, and as I said, that includes tanks or non-tanks. If you're paying attention as a DPS, you can prevent a lot of damage. As a tank, I have a lot of abilities that reduce damage. A knockback is one of those abilities that can completely negate damage if used effectively. Let's take a look at the ability itself. Force Push has a 60-second cooldown, deals some light kinetic damage, but most importantly, knocks the target back quite a ways, and they get knocked down for 2 seconds. So it's like a 2-second stun after a push. In addition to that, it also finishes the cooldown on your force charge. I normally wouldn't recommend using the ability specifically for that, but there are cases like in Hutball where you need to jump now, and the ability is useful for letting you do that as well. The Sith Inquisitor and Jedi Consular both get an AoE knockback, meaning it will hit everybody around them. It has less range and doesn't stun players, but it can be really good for clearing an area around a healer or a specific target. Here are the other classes that have a baseline knockback ability. As you can see, they are all AoE knockbacks. And both the Sniper Gunslinger and Mercenary and Commando can choose to make another one of their abilities a small single target knockback as well via their skill tree. Now that we've looked at all the knockbacks, why don't we take a look at how knockbacks actually work in-game in PvP. In this clip, I'm about to throw this operative healer towards the fire, but because of the direction they're moving and because of server latency, it's not exactly where they end up. Let's take a look. So the operative ends up in the pit, not a complete waste because they were a pretty big factor on their team for healing, but I would have preferred to kill them by throwing them into the fire. So as you can see, the operative is actually moving to the left. What I should have done is moved with them and snared them, if possible, to make lining up the throw a little bit easier. Here's an example of me doing it properly. I decided I'm going to throw this trooper in the pit, so I charge to him, and I'm moving with him. I snare him, and then I push against the direction of his movement. Let's take a look at some of the uses of Force Push, both offensively and defensively now. In this clip, I'm at the middle flag in Alderaan Civil War, and my healer is being pressured by a Gunslinger, a Consular, and by this Jedi Knight you see in front of me. Now, the Jedi Knight is spec'd to tank, so he's not going to do the most damage in the world. He is still capable of stunning and interrupting my healer, though, which could spell her death. So in the interest of trying to take some of the pressure off, I decide to use Force Push. Let's take a look. So when you're pushing a Jedi Knight, they can always just charge back to your healer after the stun's over. So in this case, I try and push him so that he won't have an easy time jumping back to my healer. So I actually managed to hit him into that railing and he drops down. So now he can't jump right back to my healer. He has to go around if he wants to do that, and that just buys her some extra time. This is a good example of a defensive way of using your knockback, using it to protect a healer or somebody who's being pressured. So here you can see that I'm defending the right-hand door on Voidstar and my healer is being pressured pretty heavily. I decided to use Force Push to help make some room for her and let her try and catch up. So I end up pushing a Jedi Sentinel, which is not my first choice, but in this case, my healer was being focus fired and a Sentinel does quite a bit of damage. Even though they can jump right back, I just wanted to get them off her as soon as possible. The Sentinel jumps back in, but I do still have my backhand available, and I do use it on the Sentinel again, just to try and slow the amount of damage they can do to my healer. In this case, it wasn't enough, we do still end up going down, but you can see the amount of time that a Force Push can buy your healer. It is quite a valuable tool, even if you're not in an optimum circumstance to knock somebody down a pit or out of line of sight. This clip is in Alderaan Civil War, and I'm defending a node, and one of my healers who's actually on vent with me, Drain, who you can see in front of me, I have him guarded, has called for some help with the Sentinel that's currently attacking him. So I decided to use Force Push to give him some breathing room. This is another good example of how you can combine your knockback with other skills to maximize its effectiveness. As soon as that sentinel jumps back to him, I snare the sentinel to allow him to start kiting him. Let's take a look. So I Force Push almost immediately here, and I'm not really concerned with the direction as long as it's away from my healer. I did knock him down the stairs, but he's still within line of sight to jump back. While I'm waiting for him to do so, I stun one of the other attackers at this node to cut down some of the pressure. I see the sentinel rejoin the fight, and I immediately go to aid my healer. The first thing I do is an intercede to cut down some of the damage that Drain's taking. And I see that he's beginning to kite, so I utilize Chilling Scream here to slow him down. Now that sentinel's caught playing catch up, and he's used his force charge, so he can't just jump right back to him. So we've looked at a few ways to use your knockback defensively. Let's look at some of the offensive applications. The most obvious offensive application is on the bridge and Void Star. But it's easy to get sidetracked when you're fighting at range and not realize where you're standing. In this instance, this bounty hunter just makes a bad decision. He just stands somewhere that's unsafe. One of the advantages of Force Push, though, is that it's quite a long knockback. It's one of the longer ones in the game, and so sometimes people think they're standing in a safe place when they're really within your kill range to push them off a cliff. Let's take a look. So this bounty hunter might have been safe if he kept moving, but instead he plants his feet and starts casting Tracer Missile, which to me is just an easy throw. There's no movement from me required at all. You'll find that in terms of accuracy when using your knockback, it's easiest to hit immobile and casting targets. Hutball is another great place to utilize your knockback offensively, but the fire grates and acid represent a much smaller target than in Void Star, so precision counts. So right here, I'm about to use Force Push. Note how far back the enemy is from the fire grate. Just note that it is possible with Force Push because of how long a knockback it is. If the enemy is very close to the fire grate, you could overshoot the fire grate completely if you push them straight across. With most of the other knockbacks, that's not going to be an issue, but with Force Push it can be an issue, so just be aware of that. In this clip, they actually go across diagonally, so they land right about in the middle, which is right where you want them to be, and they die pretty quickly. When you throw somebody into the fire, just make sure that they actually die. In this case, I'm trying to hold the upper catwalk of the enemy side on Hutball, so it's important that I be here and not get knocked off by that enemy. So be ready to finish them off if you need to, if the fire ends before the enemy dies. This next section is going to focus on the utility factor of using Force Push in specific tactical situations, so not blatantly offensive or defensive situations. In this case, I really need to force charge, but as you can see, my force charge is on cooldown. So I'm actually just going to use Force Push here to reset the cooldown on force charge. It does have the added benefit of taking a little bit of pressure off of Drain, who's standing right next to me. Now, the reason I don't just wait is because my opportunity to charge to that ball carrier is rapidly disappearing. So I throw the shadow that's standing next to Drain, and I force charge to the Sage standing nearest to the ball carrier. And this is just one more quick example of using Force Push to reset your force charge cooldown. Because of the multi-level gameplay in Hutball, you'll find that you do it most often there. Here's one people don't think of too much. In this case, I've just scored a goal in Hutball, and the ball has reset. I have only one opponent stopping me from controlling the end zone completely, and receiving a pass from my team. The easiest way to get rid of this person isn't to fight them, it's to knock them off the ledge. Now that that enemy's been knocked down, nobody is contesting this ground, and I can go up to the top of the ramp and receive a pass. Unfortunately, in this case, as you can see, my team didn't actually manage to get the ball. But if they had, I would have been fully open with nobody to stop me. Lastly, a couple of key things to remember about your knockback. Every knockback in the game generates resolve. So you need to make sure the person you're trying to knock back doesn't already have full resolve. When they have full resolve, the bar turns white instead of being an off purple color. Don't generate resolve on somebody that you need to knock back unless you're absolutely sure you won't max out their resolve. You see this all the time in Hutball. You see people trying to knock back other players who are already max resolve. Another thing to remember is that as long as your opponent is not max resolve, any knockback can be used as an interrupt, and force push specifically can be used as a stun, just by pushing someone into a wall. As a handy tip for tanks who are going to be using their knockback defensively most of the time, try and keep your opponents that are on your healer snared at all times, so that it takes them even longer to get back to your healer after you knock them back. Finally, knockbacks are one of those things that really rarely get utilized properly, so always have that in the back of your mind when you're PvPing. Is this a good time to knock back? Is anybody around me really injured and could use some space between them and an opponent? Well, that's it for this video, guys. Thanks very much for watching. If you found this video helpful and you'd like to see more things that I've written and produced, you can follow me on Twitter at @ThroneGauntlet. And you can also catch my blog, which has regular updates about a variety of topics, including PvP tanking, at thronegauntlet.blogspot.com.